Matt Clark had never expected to be stuck on an alien planet. But here he was, standing in the grand hall of a palace made of glittering stone, his boots scraping against the smooth, strange floor. His ship had crash-landed a week ago, and now he was trying his best to be diplomatic, despite the fact that the aliens around him could tear him apart with a single glance. And that was just the guards. The real danger stood in front of him, Queen Val'kara. She was enormous. Matt wasn't exactly short, but compared to her, he might as well have been a child. Val'kara's body shimmered with scales that glowed faintly, shifting in color from rich emerald to deep purple. Her eyes were huge, almost glowing, and they were the strangest shade of violet Matt had ever seen. They seemed to pierce right through him, like she was studying every thought he had before he could even speak it. It wasn't just her size or her beauty that made her intimidating. It was the fact that she radiated power, as if she was an ancient being who'd seen and done things that Matt could never even imagine. And yet, despite all of that, something about her seemed lonely. He could see it in the way her eyes lingered on him, the slight tilt of her head as if she was trying to understand him. There was no warmth in her gaze, just a distant, calculating look, as if she had built walls so high that no one could ever get through. Matt wasn't sure what compelled him to speak. Maybe it was the tension in the room, or the loneliness in her gaze that echoed his own. But before he could stop himself, the words tumbled out. "Your Majesty," he said, a smirk tugging at his lips, "you look a little lonely up here on your throne, need some company." The room went silent. Even the air seemed to freeze. Every alien in the hall turned to look at him, their expressions unreadable. Matt felt his heart race. Was he about to get thrown into a dungeon, or worse? Val'kara's eyes shifted, the glowing violet flickering for a moment, then deepening. It wasn't anger, but it was something Matt couldn't quite place. She tilted her head, and for a brief second he could almost see a small spark of curiosity in those enormous eyes. "You think I look lonely?" Her voice was rich, like the sound of 1,000 voices, but softer, more musical. It felt like a melody and a challenge all at once. Matt cleared his throat, trying to keep his composure. "I mean, you're the queen. You have a whole empire at your feet, right? But maybe even queens need someone to talk to once in a while." For the first time since they'd met, a flicker of something crossed her face, something faint, something like amusement. But just as quickly it was gone, hidden behind that mask of authority. Val'kara blinked slowly, her long, delicate antennae twitching. "I do not need company, human. I rule millions." Matt couldn't help but chuckle, feeling a little more at ease. Yeah, but even rulers get bored, right? Maybe there's more to being a queen than just ruling stuff. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. But this time, there was something softer in it, something warmer. "I do not know why you speak to me this way," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Most beings fear me." Matt shrugged casually, hopping to hide the rapid thumping of his heart. "Well, I don't know what it is, but I've never been one to follow the crowd. And besides, fear isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's better to just be real." There was a long pause, and then, unexpectedly, Val'kara's lips parted in a half-smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a rush of warmth through Matt's chest. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to break through those walls. The queen's eyes shifted again, a faint shift of color from purple to gold, and Matt could have sworn that in that brief instant she was softer, as though she had let her guard down just a little bit. "Real," she repeated, her voice like a low hum. "And what, pray tell, is real to a human?" Matt grinned, leaning a little closer, feeling a spark of playfulness in the air. "You've got me curious now. Real means I don't try to impress you, I just speak my mind. Like now, for example, I think you need a little company, someone who's not scared of you." Her smile grew ever so slightly, and for the first time, Matt saw something almost like a human emotion in her gaze. Maybe it was amusement, or maybe it was hope. "Perhaps," Val'kara mused, her voice still quiet, You are the first human to speak to me so boldly." Matt's grin widened and he took a small step forward, feeling an undeniable pull between them. "Well, I aim to please." As the moment hung between them, an unspoken understanding passed, an understanding that maybe, just maybe, Val'kara was more than just a queen. Maybe, under the layers of power and responsibility, there was a person who needed to be seen, needed to be heard, and Matt was determined to show her she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The days that followed Matt's bold remark in the throne room were strange. At first, the queen seemed to look at him with new eyes. She still held that air of authority. She was, after all, Val'kara, the ruler of a vast empire. But there was something else now. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A small crack in the wall she'd built around herself. It wasn't much, but every now and then she would look at him like he was an enigma she couldn't quite figure out. And Matt was more than happy to keep her guessing. One afternoon, as the warm alien sun streamed through the massive windows of the palace, Matt found himself sitting at a long stone table in a private chamber. The air smelled like sweet, unfamiliar fruit. Across from him sat Val'kara, her long, elegant fingers idly tracing the rim of her goblet. The otherworldly food in front of them was colorful and strange, but Matt was more focused on her than anything on the table. "You've been strangely quiet today," Matt said, his voice light and teasing. He leaned back in his chair, watching her with a smile. "What's up? You usually have something interesting to say." Val'kara's violet eyes flickered toward him, and she let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. "I am not used to having my time wasted with idle chatter." Matt raised an eyebrow. "Who says it's idle chatter? Maybe I just enjoy spending time with you. You ever thought of that?" She blinked, the corners of her mouth turning down ever so slightly. "I have been told that your kind speaks too much, that words have little value." Matt chuckled, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction at the challenge in her voice. "That's where you're wrong. Words are powerful. They can mean a lot, especially when they're coming from the right person." Her eyes narrowed, but there was a hint of something softer behind them. "You are a curious human, Matt Clark, not like the others I have met." "Maybe it's because I'm not trying to impress you, Your Majesty," he said, grinning. "I just talk." Val'kara didn't respond right away. Instead, she seemed to be deep in thought. Then, after a long pause, she spoke again, her voice a little more playful than before. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone almost mischievous. "You claim that words are powerful. I do not believe this. Words are meaningless without action." Matt's eyes sparkled with interest. "Oh, you want to bet?" A sharp look passed between them, the challenge hanging thick in the air. Val'kara leaned forward slightly, her gaze intent. "I propose a challenge, human. I will show you something about my species, something that you could never understand without seeing it firsthand. If you can guess it correctly, I will grant you a wish. Anything you want." Matt's eyebrows shot up. "Anything?" Val'kara's lips curled into a sly smile. "Yes, anything. But if you fail, you will be at my service for the rest of the month." Matt leaned in closer, his grin widening. "Deal." Her smile deepened, but there was something almost predatory in the way she watched him. "Very well, prepare yourself." Without further warning, Val'kara stood, her regal movements like a graceful dance. She motioned for Matt to follow her, and he did, curiosity bubbling up inside him. They walked through long, winding hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly, passing strange tapestries and alien sculptures that Matt couldn't quite comprehend. Eventually, they reached a secluded chamber at the heart of the palace, a space that felt ancient, full of power and mystery. In the center of the room was a strange, glowing object, suspended in midair by some unseen force. It pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic light, casting shadows that danced along the walls. "What is that?" Matt asked, his voice hushed. Val'kara's gaze softened, almost reverential. "This is the heart of my people. It is a relic of our ancient past, something that has guided us for centuries." Matt blinked, And what does it do? Thalora's smile was slow, almost sad. It allows us to communicate without words. It is the true form of connection, beyond speech, beyond the mind. It binds us to one another, but only those who understand its power can truly feel it. Matt's brow furrowed. So what do I have to do? Touch it? Thalora shook her head. No, you must understand it, feel its pulse. Only then will you see. Matt stood still for a moment, the strange object glowing before him, its rhythm deep and steady like a heartbeat. He could feel the weight of its power, the silent pull it seemed to have on the air around him. For a long moment he closed his eyes, breathing deeply, focusing. He could sense the tension in the room, the history behind this relic. It wasn't just an object, it was a living, breathing part of Thalora's people. He had to understand that connection. He had to feel it. Then it hit him, a realization as sudden as a spark. It's not about the object, he said, his voice almost a whisper. It's about the bond, the connection between you and your people. This relic represents more than communication. It represents trust. Thalora's eyes widened, her gaze softening. You understand. Matt nodded slowly. Yeah, it's not just words that bind you, it's trust. You trust each other beyond what you say, you trust in the feeling. Thalora's eyes glowed brighter, a mix of awe and something deeper, something he couldn't quite name. You are different. Few have ever understood this as you have. Matt smiled, feeling a strange warmth spread through him. I guess I'm just good at seeing things that others miss. Thalora's expression softened, a small, almost shy smile tugging at her lips. And I have learned something from you today as well. Perhaps words are not all that matter. Matt stepped closer to her, the tension between them undeniable. So, I win, right? Her eyes sparkled with something like amusement. It seems you do. He grinned, the thrill of victory settling in. Well then, I'll take my prize, Your Majesty. And as she met his gaze, he could see it, the beginning of something new, something that might just be more than words. The days after the challenge were strange, but in the best possible way. Matt and Thalora had spent more time together than he'd ever imagined, walking through the grand palace, talking about everything and nothing. The walls between them were slowly crumbling, and with every passing moment, Matt found himself drawn to her more than he thought possible. They shared stories about their worlds, his Earth filled with bustling cities and sunsets over the ocean, hers an ancient empire spanning countless planets. Thalora's voice would soften when she spoke about her people, her eyes growing distant as if the weight of her responsibility was something she could never fully escape. But it wasn't just the conversations that kept drawing Matt in. It was the way Thalora seemed to let her guard down in his presence. The way she laughed, a deep, rich sound that echoed through the halls of the palace. The way her smile could light up the entire room, even if it was just for a moment. Yet despite everything, there was still something in her eyes that Matt couldn't shake, a sadness, a loneliness that she tried so hard to hide. One evening they found themselves walking along the palace's balcony, the twin suns setting in the distance. The golden light bathed everything in a soft glow, and the air was thick with the scent of alien flowers. Thalora's hair, long and flowing like liquid starlight, swayed gently in the breeze. You never tell me about your past, Matt said, leaning against the stone railing beside her. The silence between them was comfortable, but it had always been Matt's nature to push the boundaries. What was it like before you became queen? Thalora's expression tightened for just a moment, and Matt knew instantly he'd crossed a line. She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the horizon, the shadows growing longer as the stars began to emerge in the sky. Before I became queen, she began slowly, I was different. Her voice was low, almost melancholic. I wasn't born into this role, I chose it. Matt turned to face her, sensing the vulnerability beneath her calm demeanor. You chose it. Thalora nodded, her eyes distant. My people were at war. I was one of many, but I was the only one who survived. I didn't want to become queen. I didn't want the power, the responsibility. But when I had no one else, I had to step up. I had no choice. There was a long pause as Matt let her words sink in. He could feel the weight of what she was saying, the deep loneliness that she carried with her. It was in her words, her posture, and the way she looked out into the distance, as if searching for something she could never find. "You didn't have anyone to help you?" Matt asked, his voice softer now. "No one to share that burden?" Val'kara finally turned to him, her eyes locking with his. The depth of her gaze almost took his breath away. "I had to learn everything alone. I had to be strong, Matt. There was no room for weakness, no time for emotions, not when so many lives were at stake." Matt took a step closer, his heart aching for her. "But that's not fair. You shouldn't have to be alone." Val'kara's lips curled into a small, bittersweet smile. "Fair doesn't exist in my world, human. Not for someone in my position. I had to make sacrifices, sacrifices that no one can understand." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The simple touch sent a shock of warmth through his chest, and he could feel the subtle tremor in her fingers. "You don't have to keep carrying it all by yourself, you know," Matt said quietly, looking into her eyes. "I'm here. I want to help you, Val'kara. You don't have to be alone." She blinked, as if his words were a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. For a moment, she looked as though she might pull away, but instead, she stayed rooted to the spot, her gaze never leaving his. "I am not accustomed to relying on others," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Matt took a deep breath, his hand gently enveloping hers, refusing to let go. "Well, get used to it. I'm not going anywhere." The words hung between them like a promise, and for the first time since they'd met, Matt saw something shift in her expression. The walls, the barriers she'd built around herself, seemed to crack just a little bit more. It was a small change, but it was enough. "I have been alone for so long," Val'kara admitted, her voice barely audible. "I do not know how to trust anyone." Matt squeezed her hand, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay. You don't have to trust me all at once, but I promise I'm not going to let you face this alone." For a moment they stood there in silence, the sound of the wind the only thing filling the space between them. Val'kara's eyes had softened, the golden hue flickering faintly as she looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. And in that look, Matt saw something that took him by surprise: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Val'kara's lips parted, as if she were about to say something, but the moment was interrupted by a low rumble from the horizon, followed by a series of urgent voices coming from the palace entrance. Matt turned quickly, his heart pounding as he saw a group of Val'kara's guards running toward them. "Your Majesty, there's been an attack. We need to move," one of them called, urgency in his tone. Val'kara's face hardened in an instant, the walls returning, but she didn't pull away from Matt. She didn't look scared, she looked determined. Her eyes flickered to his, and for a fleeting second, something unspoken passed between them. "Stay close," she ordered. And just like that, the moment they'd shared disappeared, replaced by the cold reality of duty and responsibility. But for Matt, it was enough to know that, even if just for a moment, he had reached her. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he was ready to face whatever came their way together. The tension in the air was palpable as Val'kara and Matt hurried through the palace corridors, the sound of hurried footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The attack had come out of nowhere, one of those surprise invasions that seemed to plague Val'kara's reign. But this time, it felt different. The urgency in her guards' voices made it clear that whatever they were facing was more dangerous than anything they had encountered before. Matt was right behind her, adrenaline pumping through his veins. His mind was racing, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation they just had. Val'kara had opened up to him, really opened up, and it felt like they were closer than ever. But now, as the palace around them seemed to be descending into chaos, all those feelings had to be shoved aside for the moment. It wasn't just Val'kara's empire at risk now. It was both of them. "Stay close," Val'kara said again, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. She was back to being the queen now, the powerful leader who had no room for weakness. But Matt could see it in her eyes, a flicker of fear she was doing her best to suppress. They reached the palace's central hall, a vast, open space filled with tall, elegant pillars and enormous windows. The once beautiful room was now a battlefield. Several of Val'kara's guards were engaged in combat with shadowy figures that seemed to phase in and out of existence. Matt couldn't tell who or what they were, but they were definitely not from around here. Without thinking, Matt grabbed a blaster from a fallen guard's belt. It felt unfamiliar and heavy in his hands, but he didn't hesitate. "I'm not just going to stand here," he said, his voice fierce. He glanced at Val'kara, who was already drawing a weapon of her own, sleek and silver, with the elegance only she could pull off. "You'll have to keep up then," Val'kara said, her lips twitching into something that resembled a smile. It was a fleeting moment, but it made Matt's heart beat faster. Even in the middle of chaos, even in the face of danger, she was still the queen who didn't flinch. "I can handle it," Matt said, grinning back at her. "Just don't leave me in the dust." Val'kara shot him a quick, knowing glance before turning her attention back to the fight. The strange invaders were relentless, moving with uncanny speed and shifting forms, like shadows that refused to stay still. But Val'kara's guards were well trained, fighting back with skill and precision. Matt had never seen anything like it. But despite their strength, the invaders weren't backing down. Matt fired his blaster at one of them, hitting it square in the chest, but the figure barely flinched. It was like they didn't even feel pain. "This isn't normal," Matt said, voice tight with concern. "What are these things?" Val'kara's face was grim as she struck down another invader with one swift move. "I don't know, but we've never faced anything like this before." Matt glanced over at her, impressed by how effortlessly she fought, the way she commanded the battlefield with such grace and power. But there was still that sadness in her eyes, the shadow of her past that lingered, even as she fought for her people. The battle raged on, but Matt's focus kept drifting back to her. It was impossible not to. Even amidst the chaos, her presence was magnetic, like a force that drew him in and refused to let go. And that was when it happened. A figure emerged from the shadows, taller than the others, and with a presence so powerful that Matt could feel it even without seeing its face. It moved toward Val'kara with purpose, its form solidifying into something more tangible. Val'kara froze, her gaze narrowing in recognition. "No," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the noise of the fight. Matt turned to her, his heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" "It's him," Val'kara said, her voice filled with a mixture of anger and fear. "The leader of the invaders. I thought he was dead." Matt didn't have time to ask more. The invader lunged at Val'kara with a speed Matt couldn't even follow. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of her, raising his blaster and firing at the enemy, but it was too late. The invader was already upon them, knocking Matt aside with one swift blow. He hit the floor hard, the wind knocked out of him. Dazed, he scrambled to his feet just in time to see Val'kara face to face with the invader. He could see the flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but it was gone almost immediately. She was the queen. She didn't hesitate. "Val'kara, get back," Matt shouted, but she didn't move. She stood her ground, her weapon raised. The invader smirked, its eyes glowing with malevolent energy. "You cannot win, queen," it hissed, its voice an unsettling mix of menace and familiarity. Val'kara's eyes burned with fury. "I won't let you destroy everything I've fought for." Matt pushed himself to his feet, pain lancing through his body. He was dizzy, his head spinning, but The invader staggered back, shaking off the blast from Val'kara's weapon, but its movements were growing more erratic. It was wounded, its form flickering as though it wasn't quite as solid as before. Matt's heart raced, but he refused to back down. He could see Val'kara's determination in her eyes, the way she gripped her weapon with such force, her entire body radiating power. For a moment everything was still, like the calm before a storm. Then with a guttural growl, the invader lunged at them again. Matt barely had time to react before Val'kara stepped forward, her eyes narrowing in fierce concentration. Without warning, she raised her hand, and Matt saw her eyes glow, vivid gold, sharp and unwavering. The invader hesitated, its form shimmering, as if trying to regroup. But before it could strike, Val'kara unleashed a burst of energy from her palm, a wave of power that sent the invader crashing backward, slamming into the stone wall with a sickening thud. Matt's breath caught in his throat as he watched the invader writhe on the floor, its form flickering like a dying light. For a moment it almost looked human, or at least it had been once. But whatever it was now, it was no match for the fury in Val'kara's eyes. The room fell silent. Val'kara stood tall, her chest rising and falling with each breath, but she didn't lower her weapon. She was still on guard, still ready for the next attack, even though the immediate danger had passed. "You did it," Matt said, his voice breathless, off-filling every word. Val'kara's gaze flickered to him, and a brief, almost reluctant smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "It's not over yet," she said, her voice steady, but there was something softer in it now. "There may be more coming." But Matt could see it now, the relief in her posture, the way her shoulders relaxed just a little. She had fought for her people, for her empire, and she had won. And despite everything, she still hadn't allowed herself to show weakness, not even a little. It was both admirable and heartbreaking. He stepped closer to her, his feet moving almost instinctively. "You were incredible back there." Her eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to fall away. All the danger, all the tension, they were just gone. It was just the two of them, standing in the middle of the wreckage. "You think so?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, and there was something vulnerable in her tone that Matt hadn't expected. He nodded, his heart hammering in his chest. "Absolutely. You didn't just protect your people, you protected me." Val'kara's expression softened, and for the first time since they'd met, her walls seemed to drop just a little. Her eyes flickered with emotion, something raw and real that she usually kept hidden. I don't know what I would have done without you here, Matt," she said quietly. "I've never had anyone stand by me like this before." Matt's heart skipped a beat. He could feel the weight of her words in his chest, the sincerity in them making everything else seem small in comparison. He reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers. "You don't have to do this alone anymore, Val'kara," he said, his voice full of meaning. "I'm not going anywhere." Her gaze softened, and she looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. The connection between them deepened in that moment, something unspoken but powerful, pulling them closer. But just as quickly her expression shifted, the queen resurfacing in her. She withdrew her hand, standing straighter. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the cool, commanding presence she had always carried. "I appreciate your help," she said, her voice back to its usual tone, though there was a hint of something new there, something softer. "But there is still much to be done. My people need me." Matt understood, of course. She had a kingdom to protect, an empire to rule. But for a fleeting second, he wished he could make her stay, wished he could convince her that she didn't always have to carry the weight of the universe on her shoulders. Before he could say anything, the sound of approaching footsteps reached their ears. The rest of Val'kara's guards, along with several other officials, rushed into the room, their faces filled with concern. But when they saw the invader lying unconscious on the floor, their expressions changed to relief. "Your Majesty, you've won," one of the guards exclaimed, kneeling before her. Val'kara gave him a sharp nod, but Matt could see the exhaustion in her eyes. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. She had put everything into this battle, and though she might have looked like the unbreakable queen, Matt knew better. She was human too, underneath it all. Matt stepped back, giving her space as her guards began to secure the room, tending to the fallen invader. Val'kara turned to him one last time, her gaze lingering on him. "Thank you, Matt," she said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "You've done more than I could have asked for today." His heart swelled. "You don't have to thank me, I'm just glad I could help." Val'kara's lips parted, as if she were about to say something else, but she stopped herself. Instead, she gave him a small, almost shy smile, the kind she rarely showed anyone. "If you ever need me," she said, "I will be here." And just like that, the battle was over. The invaders had been defeated, the palace secured, and for the first time in a long while, Val'kara seemed lighter. She had been through so much, but she wasn't alone anymore. And as Matt looked into her eyes, he knew he'd do whatever it took to keep it that way. Together, they had survived. And maybe, just maybe, they were stronger for it. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft, silvery light over the palace gardens. The night was peaceful, the usual hum of alien creatures in the distance nothing but a gentle lullaby. Yet, despite the calmness of the surroundings, Matt could feel the tension in the air, like something was about to shift, something both big and important. He was in the garden again, standing by the same fountain where he and Val'kara had shared so many quiet moments together. His heart was racing, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation, a nervous excitement that wouldn't let go. After the battle, after everything they'd been through, Matt knew there was something he had to say to her. He had known it for days, maybe longer. Val'kara approached slowly, her usual regal air softened by the night's quiet beauty. Her silver armor gleamed softly in the moonlight, her hair cascading down her back like liquid starlight. But it wasn't the armor or the strength she carried that held Matt's attention now. It was the way she looked at him, like he was the only person in the universe. "You've been distant," she said softly, her voice carrying an undercurrent of concern. "What's on your mind?" Matt shifted, his mind racing as he tried to find the words. He had never been one to back away from a challenge, but this was different. He couldn't just say anything. This mattered. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice steady but carrying a weight he hadn't expected. "About us, about what comes next." Val'kara's eyes softened, her gaze growing more intense, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. She stepped closer, her movements graceful as always. "And what do you think comes next?" Matt swallowed hard. This wasn't just about fighting invaders or surviving another day. This was about something much deeper. I think I've fallen for you, Val'kara. I didn't mean to, but I can't ignore it anymore. I've never met anyone like you. Not just because you're a queen, but because of who you are inside. You've shown me a world I never expected." Val'kara froze, her eyes widening ever so slightly, but she didn't look away. She didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. The tension between them hung heavy, thick with unspoken emotions and fears. I didn't expect this," she finally said, her voice quieter than usual. "I never thought I could let someone in like this. I've spent so long being alone, keeping everyone at arm's length. I thought that was the only way to survive, to protect my people." Matt stepped closer, his heart aching for her. "I don't want to replace everything you've worked for, Val'kara. I know how much your empire means to you, but I want you to know you don't have to be alone in this anymore. Not if you don't want to be." Val'kara looked down at the ground for a moment, her expression unreadable. She was the queen, the one who had always carried the weight of her world alone. But in this quiet moment, standing beside Matt, the walls she had so carefully built around herself seemed to crack just a little. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm scared of what this could mean. I've never let anyone get close, not like this. I've always kept my heart locked away." Matt reached out, gently cupping her chin with his hand, lifting her gaze back to meet his. "You don't have to be scared. I'm not asking for everything, Val'kara. I just want to be there for you. Whatever happens, I'll stand by your side. You're not alone anymore." She blinked, her golden eyes shining with an emotion that Matt couldn't quite read, fear, hope, uncertainty. But something in her shifted. Slowly, she closed the distance between them, her breath mingling with his, and for a moment the world around them disappeared. There was only the two of them, standing on the edge of something neither of them had expected. Val'kara's hand reached up to rest gently on Matt's chest, just over his heart. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "But I know I don't want to face it alone." Matt's heart leaped in his chest, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the battle or the palace or even the alien world they were on. It was the feeling of being understood, of finally connecting with someone who had once seemed so far away. "You don't have to," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm with you, Val'kara, no matter what." And then, as if the universe itself had given them a sign, Val'kara leaned in, her lips brushing softly against his. It was a slow kiss, tentative at first, but then it deepened, both of them leaning into it with a hunger that surprised them both. It was the kind of kiss that said everything, about trust, about desire, about everything they had been through and everything they hoped to build. When they pulled apart, Val'kara rested her forehead against his, her breath coming a little faster now. "I never thought I could feel this free," she whispered. Matt smiled, his hand gently tracing the side of her face. "You're allowed to, Val'kara. You're allowed to feel everything." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in, and when she opened them again, there was a spark of something new, something brighter than before. Maybe we can face the future together," she said, her voice steady but full of something that felt like hope. Matt's grin widened. "I like the sound of that." And in that moment, under the stars, with everything they had fought for still fresh in their minds, they both knew that this was just the beginning. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, not as queen and human, but as something more, something real. Together, they were unstoppable. The stars shone brightly above them, 1,000 lights scattered across the night sky, as if the universe itself had decided to witness this moment. Matt and Val'kara stood together in the garden, the quiet peace of the night wrapping around them like a blanket. The distant sounds of the palace guards and the faint hum of alien creatures seemed far away now, insignificant compared to the connection they had just forged. Val'kara had her back to the fountain, her hands resting lightly by her sides. Matt stood close, his eyes never leaving hers. The kiss they had shared still lingered in the air between them like a promise, like something that had been waiting to happen for far too long. "I never thought I could feel this way," Val'kara whispered, her voice soft, almost tentative. Matt's heart swelled. He took a small step forward, his hand brushing against hers, sending a jolt of warmth through him. "What way?" he asked gently, his voice full of curiosity and affection. "Vulnerable," she admitted, her eyes shining with a mix of surprise and relief. "I've spent so long hiding behind my crown, behind the walls I built around myself. But with you, it's different. I can't explain it, but it feels real." Matt smiled, his thumb gently brushing across her knuckles. "You don't have to explain, I get it. You don't have to hide with me, Val'kara, not anymore." She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze filled with something deep and unspoken. Slowly, she took a breath, as if gathering the courage to say something she had kept locked away. "I've been afraid," she said quietly, "afraid that if I let someone in, they'd see the real me, weak, uncertain, not the queen I'm supposed to be. But with you, I don't feel that fear. I feel like I can just be me." Matt's heart ached with tenderness for her. "You don't have to be perfect, Val'kara. You don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. I'm here for you, all of you." She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that lit up her face in a way Matt had never seen before. For the first time, she looked like she was free, free from the burden she had carried for so long. "I don't know what the future holds," Val'kara said, her voice stronger now, "but I know I want you in it. I don't want to face whatever comes next without you by my side." Matt's heart swelled at her words. He stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her face, bringing her closer to him. "I want that too. Whatever comes, we face it together. You're not alone, Val'kara, I promise." She didn't speak again, but her eyes said everything. She leaned in, pressing her lips softly against his, and for that moment the world seemed to stop spinning. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a vow, a promise of something real, something they could both hold on to. When they finally pulled apart, the air between them still hummed with the connection they had forged. Val'kara looked at him, her eyes shining with hope. "I've never felt more alive," she whispered, her smile growing wider. Matt grinned, his heart full. "Then let's make the most of it." And together they stood under the stars, ready for whatever came next, united, stronger than ever and no longer alone.